When The Sopranos first aired, we saw just how big the DeMeo crew was. We saw that Tony had surrounded himself with a large amount of soldiers and made members to support him if anything were to happen between New York and New Jersey. But as the series continued, we saw Tony's crew slowly dwindle down, as he had virtually lost everyone in his crew by the series' final episode, as we saw this with Paulie being alone and sitting outside of Satriali's. But in this final episode, we interestingly watch Paulie turn down being a captain of the Aprile crew, simply because he believes the crew is cursed. So, is there a curse? Personally, I believe so, because there is a streak of deaths that have affected both members of the Aprile family tree, as well as those who were once captains or leaders of the crew. The crew itself starts off on a bad foot, with the current leader of the family and the individual that the crew is named after, in Jackie Aprile Sr. unexpectedly dies of cancer to start the series. We then watch the shocking death of Richie Aprile, who was Jackie's brother. So right away we can see that there is a connection with the Aprile family name and death, as we've now seen two individuals who have that last name suddenly die by only the second season of The Sopranos. In the 8th episode of season 3, audiences also saw another unexpected death within the Aprile crew. Audiences and Tony's crew members as well were completely shocked when Gigi Sestone, a captain of the Aprile crew, suddenly died while on the toilet. In this episode, we watch Gigi succumb to an immense amount of stress due to figuring out how to control and maintain a wild Ralph, as well as feeling the pressure of trying to pay for his children's college tuition. It was later discovered at Gigi's funeral that he had heart disease, which was ultimately the cause of his sad death. And while at the funeral for Gigi, we get a look at the current status of the Aprile crew. From Tony looking at its members at the funeral home, we can see that the Aprile crew is disorganized, immature, and doesn't provide Tony with the best options for picking his next captain of the Aprile crew, which Tony ultimately forces himself to finally give Ralph his lengthy and overdue promotion of being the next captain of the Aprile crew. But sticking with season 3, we saw a conflict arise with Jackie Aprile Jr. Throughout the course of the 3rd season, we watched Jackie Jr. become a wannabe gangster and force himself into the Aprile crew, solely because of who his father was, and because of Jackie Jr. forcing his way into becoming a wannabe mafioso. It ultimately costed him his life when he decided to rob Eugene Pontecorvo's card game that had other main members at the table as well. We all know the story, as Jackie Jr. was trying to be like his role model in Tony Soprano, as Tony did the exact same thing when he was younger, ultimately earning Tony his button, except this time it costed Jackie Jr. his life. We watched the son of Jackie Aprile Sr. get whacked by his very own cousin in Vito Spatafora. So again, we can see the Aprile family tree is constantly surrounded by death. Ironically, this is a line that Rosalie herself said after the funeral of her very own son. But rotating back to the captains of the actual Aprile crew, Ralph was next up for being promoted to captain of the crew, which also meant that Ralph was next up for who was dying next on The Sopranos, as Ralph sealed his fate when he killed Tony's beloved horse, Pyomai. Next up on the Aprile family tree to be whacked was Adriana La Cerva, who is the niece of Jackie Aprile Sr., as audiences watched her shocking and sad death in the infamous episode of Long-Term Parking. To enter the series' final season, we watch two members of the Aprile crew die. The first with Eugene Pontecorvo when he hangs himself to better his own family, and finally, it all comes full circle when it comes to the Aprile crew and the Aprile family tree name, when Vito Spatafora, the nephew of Jackie Aprile Sr., gets whacked by Phil Leotardo. We also saw other members of the crew die as well. Jackie's friends in Dino Zerilli and Carlo Renzi, and as well as Sunshine from the poker game that Jackie robbed. It's no wonder that Paulie didn't want the job when Tony asked him in the last episode, as he is very superstitious and we all certainly know how Paulie Walnuts is and can be. He watched so many of his friends and colleagues get whacked from the Aprile crew, but also from outside the crew as well. And when it was all said and done, Paulie and Patsy were the last ones standing when it came to the original members of Tony's crew. But then again, when we look back on all of these deaths, all of the individuals who are mainly focused in this video video have only themselves to blame. This is especially true with the individuals of Adriana, Vito, Jackie Jr., and Ralph, as they all put themselves in the situations that costed them their lives. What are your thoughts? Do you think the Aprile crew is cursed? Let me know down in the comment section below. As always, for more Sopranos content, keep it locked here, right here on this channel.